Hi, I'm Stuart Malina, Music Director of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra. Welcome to the second of our new series of video conversations. The music that you heard underneath the credits was by my son, Zev Malina, so kudos to Zev. We're busy at work coming up with plans for our upcoming season, and we should have a big announcement for you shortly. But in the meantime, I'm very happy to introduce you to one of our very special and wonderful players. He is our principal oboist, and his name is Andreas Oeste. Hello, Andreas. It's wonderful to have you here today. Where are you broadcasting from?
Hi, Stuart. I'm here actually in State College, Pennsylvania. So it's nice. I'm used to talking to you over the phone maybe 10 or 12 hours away. So I think this is the closest we've been, even in the current circumstances.
That's right. So when did you move to State College, and what are the circumstances for your moving to State College?
So I've been here since Wednesday, which I can't believe it's not even a week. It feels like much longer. I just moved here starting at Penn State University as their new oboe professor.
Well, congratulations on that. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel way too lucky to be here. I've played, with Harrisburg Symphony for so many years now, and it's always been a big amount of travel to get there, which I've been happy to do, but now it's just a short drive, and I get to teach at a really great university. I think that's a win-win.
It's certainly a win-win for us having you closer, and welcome to the wonderful state of Pennsylvania, to the Keystone State. So let's start out talking about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you come to music, and particularly the oboe?
Yeah, so I grew up in Arkansas, Conway, Arkansas to be specific. It's kind of about centralized, not that far from Little Rock, if anyone listening has happened to be to Little Rock. I, it's funny. I've been asked this question a lot, especially as I've started here at Penn State, lots of, small interviews. And my journey to music, I kind of didn't have an option, is what I like to joke. I grew up in a family of opera singers, and as a result, I was pretty immersed from a very young age. If you've seen a Disney movie and these people singing and woodland creatures coming to the window to help fold laundry, that is a real scenario, and it's actually a little bit unnerving when you're a child, but that's how I grew up. And it's not that, nobody forced me to do this, but I was just surrounded by it for so long. And actually, the oboe was my attempt to sort of be rebellious. I knew it was an instrument that my parents didn't know a lot about, so much so that I actually thought that the oboe was the bassoon, but it worked out. But I tried to pick an instrument that was so different than the human voice that, I wouldn't feel like my parents were listening to me practice. But the joke was kind of on me with the oboe being so similar to the human voice. But that's kind of how
That's really funny, and it's good strategy though to choose an instrument that your parents really can't give you much input into. I think that's clever thinking for a young child. How old were you when you started?
I believe I was 12.
Mhm. So is this part of the school program?
Yes, so I actually started on clarinet. That's what they tended to do in Southern band programs. They typically don't let people start right away on the oboe. The reeds are annoying. The instruments themselves are very hard to procure, and they're just a little bit more expensive. So they usually start everyone on kind of a more readily available instrument, and then they switch people. Actually, my band director, she switched me in the middle of sixth grade. And I asked her later why she let me do that. And she said, "Oh, I knew you were nerdy enough," was her comment to me. She knew I'd practice. She knew I'd spend the time on it. Because when you're the only one in a band doing that, you are kind of left on your own. You have to sort of make it work.
Well, and particularly on an instrument like the oboe, which has very particular and unique challenges to it. You need someone who's going to be really focused on it, I would imagine.
Yeah, and they got kind of half of that decision right.
And so was it love at first sight? I mean, did you know immediately, oh, this is a great fit? I can see myself doing this for a long time, or did it take a while for you to acclimate to the new instrument?
I was quite a shy kid. I didn't really like to be, noticed very much. I just wanted to get in, get out. Please don't look at me too much. I always had a fear of public speaking. But when it came to playing the oboe, suddenly it felt like I had a spotlight on me, and I really enjoyed it. it was so strange, but people thought it was really cool that I played that. And it actually, for me, kind of spoke to me in that way, that I felt accepted, despite the fact that I was playing such a strange instrument. And also, I got kind of instantly rewarded because right away they gave me a lot of solo parts, and I got to find out that I really like playing solo parts. When it's on stage, I really enjoy kind of being in a leadership role, and I got to experience that right away at the tender age of 12 or whatever I was in sixth grade. Feels like forever ago.
That is fantastic. So from Arkansas, did you go to one of the big conservatories? Where did you go to college and do your further studies?
So it's an interesting story to kind of think back a little bit. My family, they ended up in Arkansas. My mom and dad, they were opera singers, like I had said, but they were in Germany at the time. And while they were in Germany, they had my sister. She was about 5 or so when they decided to come back to the States. My mom was originally from Chicago, my dad from Germany, and they came back to the United States. They had a very successful career, but they kind of figured out they didn't really want to raise children while being such active performers. They were touring a lot. They never got to really be in one place very long. And so there was a position that opened up at my undergraduate school, the University of Central Arkansas, and my dad applied to that. It was the opera workshop and one of the vocal professor positions, and they just moved sight unseen. And that's actually where I ended up going to my undergraduate. That decision, my parents really, they stressed, you can come here, you can get a pretty good deal, in-state tuition. My father worked there, so it was already discounted. And I was at first kind of upset because I was so serious about music and I wanted to get out and I wanted to go to one of these giant conservatories. But looking at it now, I'm actually incredibly lucky that I went to a smaller state school in the South. That's not something that I think you hear very often. But being such a dedicated musician and arriving right there, I got other opportunities that sometimes you don't get when you're an undergraduate. In some larger schools, a lot of the really great parts will tend to go more towards graduate students because they're there for a shorter amount of time. They have way more experience. But I, as a freshman, got to play all sorts of principal parts, and as well, I got to freelance in the area really heavily. Almost every weekend, I was off playing with a different symphony in that state or surrounding ones. And so already getting that experience as a freelance musician and just having that much responsibility thrust on my shoulders, it was stressful, but I really loved it. And it ended up, I think, just kind of propelling me to where I am today.
It's a wonderful story. And you also happened to have a spectacular teacher at your undergraduate institution, which is a wonderful happenstance. Do you want to talk a little bit about her? I know she came up to hear you play when you did the concerto with the orchestra, and she seemed delightful.
Oh, she's incredible. Yeah, she actually started at University of Central Arkansas when I was, I think, in 8th grade, something like that. So I had not really had many private lessons at that point, mostly just figuring stuff out on my own. And then here rolls into town a really, truly fantastic oboist in person. And right away, my dad kind of set up a meeting for us, and I was able to play for her. And I started studying with her right away. And then it's kind of unusual to have your high school or earlier teacher be the teacher you go to for your undergraduate. But I was kind of a wild child, and she figured out how to channel that in a way that was really beneficial and still allowed me to pursue what I was interested in. She didn't, try and put any sort of straitjacket on me. She really let me explore and innovate, which I needed at that young age. Actually, while we're talking about this, I'm making so many connections. This is very therapeutic. All of the reasons I wanted to play the oboe, she helped me pursue those. And through my undergraduate, she was there as a constant resource, as just almost, I hate to say the word peer because it was not that fashion at all. That's who she is now. But she was so helpful in helping me find my trajectory, find my path. And as well getting me off to graduate programs. She really knew the names, knew the places, and then, of course, showed up for last year, the concerto. It was so, I didn't even know she was going to be there. It really was so shocking and very heartwarming.
It's fantastic to have that kind of mentorship, that kind of help when you're at that tender age. So, where did you end up going to graduate school?
So after University of Central Arkansas and studying with Lorraine Dussault, I realized I forgot to mention her. I went on to University of Michigan, studying with Nancy Ambrose King, and that decision was very difficult. I had applied at several places, and it was actually kind of decision point between University of Michigan or Yale. And I just decided University of Michigan is a huge school. I'd never really been in a room with that many oboists at once. And it, was a little bit shocking when I got there. There were 18 of us in that oboe studio, which if you can even imagine hearing that many at once, that's
A scary thought.
yeah, I'm sorry to even make people think about that. But it was quite a move to go up there to be joining such a place. But I'd gotten to work because of my former teacher. She suggested going to a summer festival where I got to meet Nancy Ambrose King and work with her. And I just kind of knew right away that she was yet another person who could help me kind of find my path. We worked so well together. Again, I feel so privileged to have had those opportunities.
Well, before we continue on with the story of how you got to Harrisburg, how about a little bit of a musical interlude? I understand that you have a couple of performances that you're sharing with us. Do you want to introduce the first of them?
Sure thing. So this first one, this is a piece by C.P.E. Bach. This is one of the sons of J.S. Bach, who we know so famously for thousands of different works. C.P.E. Bach, he is a little bit of a different soul. He really championed a style of music in the late Baroque known as sensitive style. And this to me speaks, I think, very strongly to what we're all going through right now. This piece is for solo flute originally. I'm playing it on the oboe, doing my best attempt. But this sensitive style, it can switch on a dime, meaning the dynamics can be very sudden. The way the rhythm shifts can be, spontaneous. And this kind of died out with C.P.E. Bach because he kind of reached a sort of emotional height that couldn't be matched in the same way. But I think it still speaks to us today, despite being written in the early 1700s. It's about 5 minutes long or so, and it really delves into these sort of feelings of being alone. We're all here together, but I think this piece it really speaks to us right now.
Well, fantastic. Music by C.P.E. Bach. Well, that was extremely beautiful. And, one of the things that strikes me about C.P. Bach is that you can think of him as an end point, but you can also think of him as a beginning point. He really does form the perfect bridge between the Baroque and the classical. Thank you for sharing that beautiful music with us. So let's continue your story. You finished at Michigan, or you're in your graduate program at Michigan. What captures your attention, and why did you decide to audition for the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra?
So when you're in a musical graduate program pursuing any kind of performance degree, typically you are, or my routine was, just about every week you get online and you find any job postings that are available. And I'd auditioned for several different orchestras at this point, with varied success. That's usually how it goes. You have to take several before one really pans out for you. And it has nothing to do with, your skill at that moment. It's really just that day and how things go. That's really the luck of it. And luckily enough, this orchestra popped up that I'd never heard of in Pennsylvania, that I'd been to maybe 2 times before. But it was the Harrisburg Symphony principal oboe job. And I was really excited. And I talked to my teacher at the time and she said, "Oh yeah, you have to go take this." And at that moment, it was, about a 7.5-hour drive to get out there. I was living in Ann Arbor. And so I, made sure that I could miss some classes, talk to all my teachers to make sure that I could get away. And I actually stayed with a friend of mine in Philadelphia. So drove right through Harrisburg, stayed there the night before, woke up that morning, and then just got ready. I believe my first round was in the afternoon. So I drove through all the stress of driving through Philly to get to Harrisburg, trying to get warmed up in enough time. And then I think that audition day went really late. I think it was almost until 10 p.m.
It was a very long day of auditions, and we had some spectacular players, but I do remember very clearly that you kind of sailed through, and every round was beautiful. And you have a very unique sound to your playing. Do you have descriptives of that? Is it, you have a very round sound. It's certainly not pointed like some of the French playing that you might hear, but it's not quite as edgy as the German sound. Is this particular to the University of Michigan's program? How would you describe your style of playing?
That's a very hard question. And it's really, you've already touched on something there that's so important to oboe playing, and that's actually changed quite a bit in the past 30 years or so. There are very distinct schools of playing, and schools meaning nationalities, regions, or specific people. And it goes back hundreds of years, these different types of sounds. On the oboe, you can sound just about like anything. Usually it's, duckish or something like that, but on a good day you can sound like just about anything. And these sounds have evolved and changed depending on the people who have been very influential in certain areas. My teacher at University of Michigan, Nancy Ambrose King, certainly has a very covered sound, a very beautiful, a deep sound. My teacher during my undergrad might be just a little bit lighter, but still very beautiful, very connected. And you can hear all sorts of different sounds. And I think I found mine almost because of my upbringing. I think from hearing my parents sing all the time, from having that in my head, the oboe is so much about singing through it. There are some times where, I could give my instrument, my setup to somebody else, they could play it and sound completely different, simply because of their resonating chamber, the way they use their embouchure. There are so many factors. And so I think just the way I hear and what I want to come out of the oboe, that's how I get that sound. And for me, I want something that is very round, very lush, that doesn't get any very edgy or have any points, like you had mentioned before. I just really want that very deep sound. I always like to think of almost a lake and how deep that is. That's what I want to bring out of the instrument. But it is certainly different than a lot of American playing. And I think that's because as well, I grew up listening to a lot of different types of oboe players, a lot of European oboists, and they all have very different sound concepts as well. I like to think that I'm a good blend of both on a good day.
Oh, I would say absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra. What were your initial impressions when you first got to play with us after having gotten the job? And do you have favorite memories or a story of playing with the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra?
Absolutely. So actually, my first impression from the Harrisburg Symphony was actually during the audition day, because for those of you who might not know about these auditions, you stand backstage for a little while after being in a warm-up room, and then someone brings you on. It is very silent, and you don't really play anything until you start in on your first piece of music. I, having taken many auditions at this point, have never seen a hall like the Harrisburg Symphony, and that memory so stands out to me. I remember that door opening and just kind of being shocked at how beautiful it was. And I remember Sue Click was there guiding me out there, and she actually got worried for me because I looked so shocked and stopped walking that she thought something horrible had happened. But really, I was just so taken aback at the inside of the hall there. But then my first experience was in my trial week. And I mean, I was pretty sold right away. There's such a community to the Harrisburg Symphony, and that spoke to me in the first hour of being there. I remember I got there a good hour early, like a very diligent oboist wanting to make the best first impression possible. And I got to meet, several people who got there early as well. They were so warm and inviting. The other principal players and just members of the woodwind section all came up to me and said, how happy they were that I was there. We're really looking forward to working with me. That's not always what you get in orchestras around the country. Some are very businesslike. Maybe you'll get to talk to people afterwards. Some feel more like, let's just get it done and get out of here. With Harrisburg, it really feels like we're there to accomplish something together. We're here to make a statement. And I don't know, that's just such a special thing. And I don't think everybody knows just how special the Harrisburg Symphony is in that way.
Here. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm proudest of is that whole institutional culture of joy and love and collegiality. I'm very delighted with how that's played out over time.
Yeah, me as well. And I mean, one of my favorite memories of Harrisburg has to be from a year ago when you offered up to me, would you like to play a concerto with the orchestra? And I was so excited, and I did not know you'd pick one of the hardest to do, the Strauss.
Yeah, not just a concerto, kind of the concerto.
The marathon concerto. But I loved getting to do that, not so much because I love some of the leadership, like I had mentioned before, that comes with the oboe, but because I got to just work with all my colleagues in that fashion. It's really, the Strauss is very much a piece of chamber music. That just happens to have an oboe line that just won't stop. And it was so fulfilling and rewarding. And I've said this already so many times, but so heartwarming to get to play that, to get to come on stage with my colleagues, to have them there, ready to make music with me, to collaborate, to support, and to just get to play such a beautiful work with all of them. I don't think I've had a musical experience as great as that.
It was great for all of us, and I mean, your performance was magnificent. But as you say, the nature of that piece it really feels like chamber music, just on a larger scale. And I love the fact that when we have musicians soloing with the orchestra, their colleagues in the orchestra really rise to even a higher level of playing and listening, and it was a magical experience. One that I will remember for a long time. So when you look forward, assuming this pandemic will end sometime, hopefully very soon, how do you see the future of orchestral music, and where do you see orchestras like the Harrisburg Symphony fitting into that?
So I too am hoping that our pandemic ends soon, that we can get to some sort of normalcy. But I do think this is really an opportunity for a lot of ensembles, whether it be orchestral, different chamber groups. I think this is a moment for us to kind of reset in a way, in thinking about what we want to program going forward, what we really want to say. I think, there's always a little bit of, we should do this because this is how we've done it. Oh, we need to program this music, it's been a while for this. I think now, perhaps we can go forward programming things that might speak a little bit more to our global shared experience here. And as well, bringing forth perhaps pieces of music that aren't always heard as well. Along with this, I think that people are almost going to be dying to get to hear some live music. I'm excited when I get to hear my Pennsylvania State audition videos here in a little bit, when they audition for ensembles. I'm so excited to get to hear everybody play the same 3 excerpts in a row, because I haven't heard people play live music in a long time, even though that will also be through the computer. So I think that I think the element of community is going to be incredibly strong. I think getting to see one another in that space and experience music together, I think it's going to be reinvigorating. I think we're going to see, or I'm hoping at least, that we see a reinvigoration in the arts of all kinds.
Well, amen to that. I certainly, I feel the same way. I do think that there's going to be a desperate need for live performance experience, and certainly I'm counting on that. Before we go to your second musical excerpt, what is it that you like to do that is extra musical? What do you do for fun?
I'm an oboist. I don't do anything for fun.
You make reeds for fun.
Yeah, I tried very hard to not show off my entire reed table here, a place that I usually spend hours at every day. But, aside from making music and, working on everything that there is there and answering emails that I always have to do, one of my absolute favorite things to do is cook. If there's something out there to make, I really want to learn how to make it. And I think it's really because it uses a lot of the same skills in an odd way that you have to cultivate to be a good musician, but you get to eat it at the end. So I can't think of anything better than that. So that's something I absolutely love to do, as well as getting out into the outdoors. I really enjoy hiking, camping every once in a while. It's just great to be out in nature.
Well, you've certainly chosen a beautiful place to be if you want to be outdoors. The central Pennsylvania is spectacular, particularly the area up around State College. So I hope you'll enjoy being there. So do you want to introduce your second composition?
Yes, so this next piece is by a composer, Giles Silvestrini. He's a living composer right now. He teaches in France, and he's an oboist. So as such, he's actually made it kind of his mission to compose pieces for the oboe, typically alone, that are just leaps and bounds above possibility. He, having such an intimate knowledge of the instrument, can write things that are so difficult, but still technically possible. It's sort of similar to Paganini in that respect, how he wrote such virtuosic things for the violin, but he could do them, so why couldn't you? So I kind of took that spirit here in this, this day of isolation. I wanted to, use some of those hours that I had all of a sudden to experiment and to really push myself. So this piece, despite the fact that it's barely 3 minutes, is about 6 pages, and I think it took all the ink out of my printer when I had to print it off. But it's very quick-witted. It's inspired by Prokofiev, so it kind of shifts on a dime. It can be happy, it can be sad. It almost berates you with all of its different humor and emotions. But I really hope you enjoy this feat of athleticism.
Well, prepare to be dazzled. Let's hear it. I'm actually speechless. That was quite amazing. The things that you can pull off on an oboe are quite extraordinary. Thank you for sharing that with us. So before we call it quits for today, is there anything you'd like to say to our patrons?
Absolutely. This is a very interesting time. I hope all of you, are staying safe, staying healthy. And I think it's just important for us all to realize that we'll get through this together. And it's really the together part that I want to emphasize. I'm so happy we have this series right now. I'm so happy we can connect in this fashion. I think it's incredibly important. And I think, it's only a matter of time before we get to be on that stage again, before we get to make music together and make music for all of you. I know that's what I'm holding out for. That's what I'm going to be the most excited for, when I get to see everybody's faces again and come together for a musical experience. So thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to anything about an oboist's life. And thanks to all of you who make this possible.
Well, on that note, thank you, Andreas, for joining me. Great to see your face. I look forward to seeing it in person, hopefully very soon. And best of luck with the start of your school year at Penn State.
Thank you so much, Stuart, and great to see you too.
Thanks so much to Andreas Oeste for his time and, of course, his beautiful music making. Next month, our video series will be featuring our principal second violin, Nicole Charlot. This video series is somewhat of a work in progress, so we very much welcome your feedback, your comments, and whatever suggestions you might have as to what you'd like out of this series. What would you like us to talk about? Who would you like us to talk to? I also would like to say that if you want to support the symphony, you can do so at our website, harrisburgsymphony.org. I'd also like to thank Natalie and George at Wonderscope for the wonderful work they've done putting together these videos. And in the meantime, this is Stuart Malina signing off.